Good evening. I apologise if it's a bit dark in here again. So this video is based around an epic question I received a couple of weeks ago from who I'm assuming is one of my followers, if not a person who kindly paid my channel a visit and left, as I said, very interesting comments. So without further ado, I will proceed to address it. This person says, and I quote, "What I don't understand is how anything I read for PDA fits under the autism spectrum. It seems the only thing they share with traditional ASD is a need for control, which isn't a defining characteristic of autism, being unable to understand or express effective social communication. It seems that, while PDA people may be socially awkward, they can read social environments well enough to manipulate others. This indicates that they do have cognitive empathy, a trait ASD people do not naturally develop. While they may speak to their boss in the same way as a colleague, it doesn't seem to be out of ignorance of the differences, which would indicate deficits in reading social cues, but out of the perfectly logical view that no human should be above others. It also seems PDA people, such as yourself, are capable abstract thinkers, while ASD people are concrete, rigid thinkers." Close quote. PDA is often referred to as atypical autism for good reason. People with PDA may well appear as though they are completely normal, to such an extent that they are often described as having a hidden disability. Now, demand avoidance is prevalent throughout the spectrum, yet it is exceedingly pronounced in those with PDA, hence the name pathological demand avoidance. Now, there are numerous differences, but there are also various similarities. Prior to the publication of the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, number 5, conditions such as Asperger's syndrome or pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified were diagnosed as individual forms of autism. Such terms have now been rendered obsolete and are no longer recognised by the DSM and come under the all-encompassing umbrella term of Autism Spectrum disorder, divided into 3 levels based on level of support required. Despite autism being a vast tapestry of coexisting disabilities and abilities, bordering on superpowers, whereby each individual afflicted or gifted is affected differently, there are, however, fundamental pillars to autism, namely social deficits, language problems and restrictive or repetitive behaviours, all of which PDA people possess to varying degrees. Let's have a look at the diagnostic criteria for PDA. The third main point describes how the person with PDA may appear sociable but lack depth in their understanding. The person whose comment I just read out has observed that people with PDA are able to manipulate their social environment and manipulate others, indicating a high level of cognitive empathy. I have spoken about empathy on my channel before, but for those of you who are newcomers, I will explain 2 types of empathy, emotional and cognitive. Emotional empathy is the ability to feel what others are feeling, or to put oneself in the shoes of another. It's a myth that autistic people are devoid of empathy. People with a more classic presentation of autism, I believe, have an abundance of emotional empathy. They may feel overwhelmed in the midst of human hysteria, for example, but what they really lack, giving off the impression that they lack empathy entirely, is the ability to understand the other person's feelings at an intellectual level, which would denote a lack of cognitive empathy. Let's focus on personality disorders for a moment, namely Cluster B personality disorders such as antisocial personality disorder, otherwise known as sociopathy, and narcissistic personality disorder. Individuals suffering from said conditions possess an abundance of cognitive empathy, yet ostensibly display a total absence of emotional empathy. They have an uncanny ability to toy with and induce any emotional state in their hapless victims, which indicates they have at least some understanding of emotions, despite subjectively experiencing a very rudimentary form themselves. It is for this reason that cognitive empathy, when standing alone, without its counterpart, emotional empathy, is sometimes referred to as cold empathy, and, furthermore, emotional empathy is understandably referred to as warm empathy. Now, the person with PDA, unlike sociopaths and narcissists, who seem to only possess cold empathy, and classically autistic people, who seem to solely possess warm empathy, have both. The PDA person's relationship to control is maternal. In fact, relinquishing control may be akin to unwillingly giving up a child for adoption, or being forced to terminate a relationship or friendship with someone they love dearly. If for whatever reason control has been lost due to, say, a person demanding something from them, the person with PDA may find that their emotional empathy temporarily lifts off them while their cognitive empathy kicks into overdrive. Animal panic has set in, and the person with PDA will do everything in their power to regain or reclaim control. Once control has been reinstated, the emotional empathy may crash back inside the person with PDA with a tremendous force, and regret and sympathy may set in and spread like a wildfire. Sometimes this process may repeat itself numerous times. I'm sure many parents of PDA children out there are all too familiar with their children bouncing from one emotion to another, or not being able to decide on whether they want to hurt you or shower you with love. For example, telling you that they hate you while simultaneously trying to cuddle you. This would be the emotional empathy, or warm empathy, yo-yoing in and out of their body. The person with PDA, much like with other autism profiles, may have a very narrow band of interests, but it is far more likely for the person with PDA to direct their obsessions towards people rather than things. This social obsession may be one of intense hatred or one of impassioned romance. However, while love yields more fruit than hate, either can lead to the total objectification of a person with little regard for their feelings and autonomy. It is also noted that a large portion of PDA children in their early years exhibit language delay with a good degree of catch-up. Where people with PDA astound people with their highly developed verbal skills, indicating that there may not be a problem with language output, they may struggle with information and language processing, which may indicate a problem with language input. The words conveyed by a person in conversation will be heard no problem by the person with PDA, but they appear to be distorted at first, and it may take a while for the sentence to fully crystallize. As previously stated, people with PDA tend to exhibit more social graces than other people on the spectrum, such as a more acceptable and at times intense use of eye contact, and an enjoyment of humour and banter. However, like other parts of the spectrum, sarcastic remarks may be totally lost on the person with PDA, and may take bouts of light-hearted teasing from their peers the wrong way, and misconstrue gentle ribbing for vicious personal attacks. Okay, I hope that was clear. If not, then please tell me and I'll endeavour to explain more. Thank you again for the wonderful question. I'll speak to you all soon.